All right, guess what, Kat? Everything is recording.
Well, hello. That is good to hear.
Hello.
I will say my roommate is cooking his dinner in the back because we're around
It's okay.
the dinner time. So,
This is still gonna help FDP potential FDP students anyway. Let me
yeah,
find the
that's
questions
part of
for
the
you.
FDP life is your roommates will always be in the background doing
Yeah.
things. At least when you're in a pandemic and taking classes from home.
I guess to contextualize this video, so I'm Jeremy. I graduated from Calarts acting program in 2018. And while I was there, I had the good fortune of being in a bunch of screenwriting classes taught by Ernie Marrero, where I met Kat. And Kat, did you want to let the viewers know who you are and what you did there?
So I am Walker Shea. I was in the MFA directing program. I was a director, writer, actor. I did all of it because I was taking a lot of the screenwriting classes. I was also the teaching assistant for that class, which basically meant that I went and made copies of scripts. and
So valiantly.
I left some feedback on the scripts, but
Yeah.
usually we went over them in class. So
So Kat and I went to Calarts together, different programs. She was in the Master's FDP. I was in, and also just to clarify for people, so Calarts, the film directing program, there's only a master's, right? Mm-hmm. And if you want to do a bachelor's in film, there's just like the film video degree, which is kind of, they're very different worlds at Calarts. And just from my perception, and I'm sure you would feel the same, I feel like the FDP program I would have much rather be in than the BFA for film video.
Well, it 100% depends on what you're making. Like for me,
Okay.
I would be I'm much happier with the FDP or film directing program because it's much more for narrative filmmaking.
Oh, okay, well, there we go. We're already answering something that we could possibly... Yeah, okay, so the FDP program is a big focus on narrative filmmaking.
Right. And what that basically means is FDP focuses on making films that you're kind of more familiar with, which is like there's a beginning, middle, and end.
Yeah.
And you can kind of deviate from that, like starting media res, which just means starting in the middle of your story and then maybe going back to the beginning later or something. But it's the very traditional type of storytelling that you see in television and in Hollywood.
Yeah.
But film and video is much more focused on experimental film.
Okay.
And that isn't to say that they never do narrative film.
Yeah.
They just don't have as much interest in that as a general rule.
Yeah.
They're usually doing stuff that is like, well, experimental is kind of the main word coming to mind, but tends to be like non-narrative, doesn't necessarily have a plot. It can sometimes just be about the visuals.
Yeah.
I know on like YouTube, there's an example of kind of a non-narrative film. It's not from Calarts, but it's called The Color of Pomegranates. Mm-hmm. It's basically a poetry film. So to get a sense
Oh,
of,
yeah.
or
Of
if you
what
look
film
at like
video might be like.
right. And it's all over the place in terms of what they make.
Yeah.
So if you're much more into experimental or artistic filmmaking, well, I don't want to say that's the wrong word, but
Yeah. It's
Stuff
all
that
artistic in different ways, right?
yeah, but when I say that, I just think in terms of like you're not necessarily out to tell a traditional story.
Yeah.
But film directing is much more for people who are like, no, I want to
Make
be
movies.
the next Tim. Yeah, I want to be the next Tim Burton. Although
Yeah.
do not say Tim Burton in your application.
Don't mention it.
'Cause I-
They'll think you're pandering or what?
Well, so I briefly worked in the admissions office. And I saw that pretty much every department just gets tired of people mentioning Tim Burton.
Yeah.
Especially because like everyone says Tim Burton's, and I understand the impulse. I think
you say
I
Walt
said
Disney?
Henry. Yeah, I think I said Henry Selick, but
Okay. Oh, I didn't even know he was a
there-
graduate of Calarts. What the hell?
yeah, well, he never graduated.
Okay,
he dropped
went to
out.
Calarts. Got it.
Yeah,
Got
he
it.
went there, and allegedly one of the doors in the Chouinard dorms was built by Tim Burton, and I've seen
Yeah.
the door.
333,
It looks
right?
like I think so. It looks like
Yeah.
a Tim Burton door, but I'm like, I don't know if he
Yeah,
actually
it's
built
wonky.
it. Yeah,
I know,
it's
it's
just
like half
it's the,
evil.
yeah, it's just the typical like once you see it,
Yeah.
you're like, that's the Tim Burton door.
That must be it. Yeah, there's a lot of weird stories around Calarts for the people. I guess it's a quick tangent. Like, there's rumors that there's a small door under one of the stairways to the cafeteria. It's rumored Mickey Mouse lives there. There's a lot of crazy stuff going on at that school.
I don't think I heard about the Mickey Mouse one.
Oh, you haven't?
I didn't
You
hear
know
about
the door
Mi-
I'm talking about, though. Like when you're going
Yeah,
up
I
to
know
like the cafeteria and there's the tiny little door that's like down the yeah.
right. No one
Mickey
watching
Mouse's
this, if
house.
they haven't been to Calarts, will have any idea what we're talking about. They'll be
I
like,
know.
"What door?"
But it's okay. It'll
and
be
the-
like a nugget
it's
for
also
if
a
they end
very
up going.
it's also a very small campus, so like you get
Yeah.
really familiar with all of it really quickly.
Yeah.
And yet it somehow has the most confusing layout I've
I
ever
know.
I've
It's
ever
like,
seen
wait,
in a
what?
school.
Am I this floor and then I'm on this floor and is it this chunk? Yeah. But
Yeah,
so
I just
no, sorry, you were saying, Kat?
I was constantly lost my first year, and I was just like,
Yeah.
it's one building. How am I always
Yeah.
lost? This makes no sense. But
Yeah, but it's fun. It's a fun place to get lost. You know, you never know what you'll stumble into. But what made you personally want to do the master's program at CalArts as opposed to anywhere else? What was it that really drew you personally?
so I'm gonna be honest with my backstory.
Yeah.
It's not the typical CalArtsian backstory.
Do any of
It
us
was
have
not
that?
my dream school.
Okay. There we
Also,
go.
everyone says it's their dream school in their applications. Just FYI.
Yeah.
But it was not my dream school. I didn't actually know about CalArts when I first applied. I was just trying to find a film school to apply to, and I knew about I knew about Tisch, and I knew about USC and all of that. And I was talking to a teacher at the University of Nevada, Las Vegas, because I
Yeah.
briefly took some film classes there because I lived in Vegas for like a year or so.
Yeah.
And she was just like, "You're kind of weird. You should apply to CalArts." And I was like, "Okay." And she meant that as a compliment. She was not
Yeah.
trying to be mean. Like, she liked me. She's just like, "You're kind of a weirdo."
Yeah. You might fit
Try
in
CalArts.
well at CalArts. Yeah.
Yeah, and I looked it up and I was like, "Oh, it's pretty reputable." Okay. And I was like, "Oh, it's the Disney school. They do the animation thing." And so I was like, "Cool." And so I just applied to all of the top ranking film schools because I was like, "Well, if I'm going to go into debt, I guess I'll do it in style."
Yeah,
And
a
CalArts
place
was the
that-
one. Yeah, and CalArts accepted me, and I'm like, "Okay, I guess we're going here."
Yeah. That's so funny.
And then I'll talk to other people who are like, "Yeah, I really wanted to come here, and I applied several times," and I was just like, "Oh,
Yeah.
I just kind of did this because it was like somewhat of a whim, because
Yeah,
I
yeah,
didn't
yeah.
really know anything about CalArts, but
Yeah.
that sometimes works in your favor because
Yeah.
CalArts just likes you if you're weird. So if you just
Yeah.
kind of come at it with your natural self, you're more likely to get in than if you're trying to cater to them specifically.
Yeah, like if you really talk about the art that you're interested in making or like the kind of storytelling you want to do or whatever, like what draws you. I'm kind of I didn't have like the same story, but I also I think my top was either between like UCLA or NYU. But then I didn't get into UCLA and I did get into CalArts. And then the NYU audition hadn't happened yet because I was a transfer student. And I was like, you know what? CalArts feels right. I'm going to CalArts. And I ended up not doing the NYU audition at all. But yeah, so I guess we're two people who we weren't like CalArts. I've always dreamed of being under the mouse.
Yeah, I think I broke some hearts when I told that story because they're like, "You got in
Yeah.
on your first try and you didn't. It wasn't like your dream." And I'm like, "No, I just heard about it the first time." But
Yeah.
but I also think that I feel like that alleviated pressure from me though because I
Yeah.
wasn't, because I wasn't like. I don't want to. I wasn't like, "Oh my god, I want to get in." I was just like, "Oh, it'd be neat if I got in."
Yeah.
And I think that lack of pressure really
Yeah.
helped me just be really authentic in my application, and I
Yeah.
think that's ultimately what did it.
That's awesome. Yeah, they just want something a little, I guess, they want to see that uniqueness. And so,
Yeah, and
sorry?
just in the film directing program, one of the really important aspects of your application is the at least when I applied, I don't know how much the application has changed because I graduated in 2018, but it was the storytelling element. When you apply, you tell a story about, like, in 1 minute, you tell a story about yourself. And it's like a life-altering story, and you have to just tell it not as, like, you don't have, like, without acting out the parts or anything like that. You just tell the story.
Yeah.
And it's how engaging can you make that story without adding a bunch of bells and whistles to it.
Yeah.
And my story was apparently interesting enough.
Nice. What was your story about? Do you want to share what your story is about? Or is that a private thing?
No, it's not really private. It's a little weird. It's the story. I don't think I ever told my dad this, but it was the story of when a trigger warning for gun violence, I suppose. It was when he accidentally shot himself. He survived.
Oh my gosh,
but it was the story of the time my dad got drunk and accidentally shot himself.
Well, that sounds like a great story.
And I titled it "The Day I Nearly Lost My Super Nintendo," because the bullet almost hit my Super Nintendo.
That's funny. That's good.
That was my takeaway from the story, and I think that's what put me over the top of getting in.
Yeah.
And it's really also just making sure you have a really clear story, very focused, and one that really draws the listener in. It doesn't have to be that personal. It can just be something that mattered to you. You don't necessarily have to dig super into your super private thoughts or anything. I'm actually just very open with my dad's stories. Anyone who knows me, I always have most people know my dad's stories. I am not shy about it.
Nice. But no, that's great. But no, just focus on, sharing your emotional beats of your story, and you'll do all right, sounds like. So but you were saying, so you did your undergrad in Las Vegas?
No, I did my undergrad in Ohio. I just didn't have any film experience, so I I briefly worked in Las Vegas and took a couple of classes.
Okay, that were film related.
Yeah, I did my undergrad at the Ohio State University.
Okay, was it in anything theater film related?
It was for theater. At the time I went there, they didn't have anything for TV or anything. But I think they do now. I'm not sure.
Okay.
But when I went there, they only had theater. And so I did that. And on the one hand, theater is a good foundation for filmmaking because a lot of filmmaking comes from theater. But the OSU program is not the one I would recommend, which sounds very mean, but it's true.
Yeah.
It's not the one I would recommend. It's it has a bit of a reputation, I think, now. Not being the strongest, but if it's your only option, you'll be fine because I went there and got into Calarts. So.
Yeah. Okay. So it prepared you in certain ways, but it wasn't the ideal preparation. Is kind of what it
wasn't.
Sounds like. Yeah.
Well, again, I don't know the program anymore. I graduated from OSU in like 2010.
Okay, there we go.
So I can't speak for how much the program has changed since then.
Yeah.
The one thing I did like about the program, though, is that they had you go through every aspect of working in the theater. Yeah. Like, I worked in costuming, I worked in set, I worked in acting, I did directing. Like, they have you do all of it. Mm-hmm. And I thought that was a pretty smart idea.
Yeah.
But I didn't really focus on anything specific when I was there.
Got it.
So if you're looking for a specific focus, it's probably not your best bet.
Yeah. Okay.
But if you want something but it's good for being well-rounded.
Yeah, it's like a holistic understanding of the theater.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and that's kind of where I'm coming from with the, like, it's not the strongest program, but it's not the weakest.
Yeah.
It's much more. It's a lot better for people maybe looking for a more well-rounded experience in theater. But if you're like, oh, I want to be an actor, it's not the worst thing, but it also won't be your only focus. Again, that is what it was.
Yeah.
People who go there now will be like, it's not like that at all. And I'm like, that was a long time ago. I graduated in 2010. So
yeah. That's so funny. Yeah, it's a lot can happen in 10 years, and it's tough to always
Yeah,
know.
no, it's been a
But
yeah, which is weird to think about that it's been that long, but yeah, it's
I know.
so
We just don't think about
so
it.
I guess
No.
I shouldn't tell people that it's not good because I'm like I haven't been there in 10 years.
I know.
I just have my opinions and all of that.
Yeah, of course. And hey, that's all we can do, in these interviews. But so, okay, so you went to undergrad in Ohio, you took some classes in Vegas, and then how did it feel transitioning into the FDP program? I mean, what were like the initial things you were thinking or worried about, or just your perceptions as you were getting used to the program at Calarts?
Well, the one big difference was that I'd never been to an art school. Because even OSU was like, it was a school for pretty much any major.
Yeah.
Its big thing is actually health and anything related to the medical field. That's where OSU
Yeah.
really shines.
Okay, yeah.
And so I didn't really have any experience with an art school, and my first day, I compared to feeling like Ron Swanson. Because I walked in, I heard some atonal music, or not like just like it was just kind of this really experimental music, and I'm like, and it's just echoing through the hallways. And I got there before
Yeah.
everyone had come back from summer break, because
Yeah,
the school is just gone, and like everyone's just gone in the summer, like the campus is just dead,
Yeah.
and I was not used to that either. Because most schools I go to, everyone is still kind of bustling with their summer school classes. But I got there and there was like nobody there. And I'm alone. I just hear this music in the hallways everywhere I go. And I go up the stairs and there was like there were these two people, I'll never know who they were, dressed in kind of Rocky Horror Picture Show outfits, but they had paper bags over their heads and little smiley faces drawn on them. And
Okay.
one is sitting in a chair, and one is dancing around the one sitting in a chair, and there's a tarp under the chair. And next to them is a hammer, some eggs, and tomatoes. And they were encouraging people to smash the tomatoes and eggs on their head.
I
And while the
remember
other-
those people.
You remember?
I
you
saw
remember
them too. Yeah.
I used to have video of them, but I don't know where it went.
Oh my
That
gosh,
was
yeah.
my first
Like smash the
day.
egg, and I was like, wait, what? And it is a really weird social experiment because it's like, are you gonna hammer the person? Like, are you allowed to have? It's weird. What does it bring out of you?
Yeah,
as a
no, I
viewer?
was
Yeah,
I was slightly terrified. I was like,
Yeah.
"Oh God, don't put that there."
I know.
And but it was my first. So I hear this atonal music playing in the distance while one of them is dancing and one's just sitting in a chair. And somebody just happened to have walked up and smashed the tomato and then just like smeared it on their head. And I'm just sitting there like, what is going on?
Yeah.
Because again, I had come from some like Midwestern town, that in Ohio, where there weren't that many artists around me, to this, and I'm just like, all right, well, that's different. But then it took maybe about a week before I was desensitized.
Yeah, and you're like, hey, weird stuff happens up here in Valencia, and that's what it's
Well,
like.
it stops even being weird. Like you're
Yeah.
just like, oh, I know what that is, and like you can put it in context.
That's true.
Like, one time I was sitting in the cafeteria not cafeteria, the coffee shop, Tatum.
yeah.
And this class comes through, and it was everyone dressed in like different costumes. Like one person was in a hot dog costume, one person was a clown, and they're like just slowly walking through, like very slow motion, and no one really looks at them. I look up, I go, oh, that's the clowning class, and then I just go back to what I'm doing.
Yeah.
I just knew I just knew instinctively what was going on, and so
Yeah.
it wasn't even the like, oh, that's strange, or oh, I guess that's a class. You know what class you're looking at some point.
Yeah,
I'm
and
like,
so your
oh,
body's
it's an
like,
acting
oh.
class.
Yeah, that's so funny. That reminds me of, it's kind of a dark parallel, but I've been reading Viktor Frankl, Man's Search for Meaning lately. And for those who don't know, it's like he talks about being in Auschwitz and other concentration camps. But one of the pages I just read, he just talks about how he really learned there that a human being can get used to any conditions. Like after a few days, a few weeks, wherever you are, your mind is just, okay, this is how it is now. But for Calarts, that definitely that definitely happened. Maybe for people, you know, who you didn't think it might happen.
I understand the comparison, but it's like, anyway, he was talking about Auschwitz, and I'm like,
I know.
Like,
it's a bit dark.
I mean, I totally understand why you
I
made that
thought
comparison.
that,
I was just like, I wouldn't go Auschwitz. I wouldn't
I know.
go there.
We wouldn't bring that up. I know, but anyway.
I get what you mean.
Yeah, but it's
yeah,
a very
eventually
illuminating book. But
yeah.
what was I gonna say about?
And you get used to it though. But
yeah, but
if you haven't,
sorry,
I'm
if you haven't,
I'm just saying if you've never, if you haven't been to an art school before, then it's gonna be different. It's gonna take a minute, but then eventually you just settle right in, and you either become one of the weirdos or you're just like accustomed to them.
Yeah, there you go. Yeah, just hanging out. Yeah, I always felt like I was like a quote unquote more regular person, just in the midst of Calarts, and I was like, all right, you know, let's make the best of it and be open to everything. But I mean, so what were your kind of, so those are kind of your first impressions of Calarts. How did you feel about the program itself, you know, in the first few weeks, first few months?
I didn't really know I went in with no expectations. And I didn't actually know very much about film when I went in. I just knew I wanted to be a storyteller and use the medium.
Oh, okay.
So it was very illuminating, and I kind of learned really quickly. I kind of quickly shed a lot of preconceived notions of what film is, or even what experimental film is. And even within those first few months, I was just like, oh, now I kind of understand these more experimental films and what they were trying to accomplish. Like the ones that tend to get made fun of by a lot of people. And they should still be made fun of, don't get me wrong.
Yeah.
But
Why
but
not?
you know, even within the first few months, I started to walk away with a better understanding of what they were trying to accomplish.
Confusion. No, I'm just kidding.
Sometimes that was the goal.
Yeah, sometimes.
Like Chien, Andalou is a really popular one that people love to get images. Like I think there's like a horror video game, like an indie horror video game that used images from Chien, Andalou. I might be butchering the name. I apologize. My French is atrocious. But
That sounds pretty
it was a
right.
film made by Bunuel with Salvador Dali. So you know it's
okay.
going to be real weird.
Yeah.
But going through that film and really explaining the visuals and that it was very much inspired by dreams, I was like, oh. But it also kind of takes away the weirdness of it. So when you go back and watch it, you're kind of ruined because you're just
Yeah.
like, oh, I understand what's going on with this. And
Yeah,
you
you're like,
become
oh, it's a
the
dream.
person.
Okay. Yeah.
Well, not only that, you become the person that those shows and movies make fun of that come up, and it's like, oh, I understand what they're doing with this color. You become that human.
Yeah.
Because you suddenly understand it, and you're like, oh, I get it. I mean, there's still art pieces I look at, and I'm like, I don't get it, but
Yeah.
but you start to become that human where you're like, I understand what they were trying to accomplish.
Yeah.
Whether you agree that they accomplished it or not,
Yeah.
different ballgame.
That's so funny. No, I remember I had a similar reaction like during one of our like conversations in contemporary theater, and I went up to the teachers and I was like, you know what? It's like my second year. It's like I think I've realized about myself, even if I really initially don't like a piece of art or don't really feel anything from it, if I hear the artist explain what they were thinking of going into it, and I like it, I like the art piece now. And you know, and I guess it is interesting because like that's a whole another. We won't get into this because that's a whole can of worms. But it's like, is art are you meant to get something from it right away, or if you can get something when it's explained, does that mean that now it has the value? But anyway, so
like
yeah,
I used to make fun of experimental film. I still do, but now I can be like, oh no, I understand the context now, and I know
Yeah.
how to I know how to readjust my expectations.
yeah,
And I never thought I would list a experimental film as one of my favorite films, but the Czech New Wave film Daisies is really good. It takes some historical context to understand it because it's from a country that no longer exists, the Czechoslovakia, and it was a dictatorship when it came out, so it was very much commentary on that dictatorship that is more or less dissolved now.
Yeah.
So without that historical context, some of it seems very confusing and you don't necessarily understand the character's motives. But
Okay.
when you have that like little crucial bit of information, you're like, oh, I understand. I get this
Yeah.
now.
Okay.
And I just really love the visuals in it. But I don't know if I would have felt that way before Calarts, to be honest. I might
Yeah.
have just been like, what? This is weird.
Yeah. So would you say like you really enjoyed the program in the beginning, and it kind of seems like it was, here's different movies trying to do different things, and let's kind of break down what they were trying to do and how they achieved it.
Yeah, like it exposed me to films I would have never even thought about before I
Yeah.
applied.
Yeah.
And you even, because a lot of people think about, like Christopher Nolan films, or they think about, Star Wars and
Yeah.
how it's, they might think of, I'm blanking on the director's name, but it's the Japanese director that very much influenced George Lucas's shots and cinematography.
I only know Kurosawa and Ozu.
Kurosawa. It was
It's
Kurosawa,
Kurosawa?
I
Okay.
believe.
Nice,
Yeah,
nice.
his sort of like his older films inspired Star Wars, and you really start to see where a lot of your favorite filmmakers got their inspiration,
Yeah.
and it builds on your knowledge that already exists. And you're like, oh, I really admire this director, for example. I didn't know they were inspired by this other director.
Yeah.
I should check out their work.
Yeah.
And you also start to evaluate movies differently. And what I mean by that is like when you go to a movie, typically you go in as like, did I like it or did I not?
Yeah.
And I still do that, but now I also go like, okay, I didn't like that story, but what did I
Yeah.
think about the cinematography? What did I think about the editing? What did I think, like, what about the writing did I not like?
Yeah.
What about it did I like? And you kind of break it down a bit differently.
Yeah. You can see the
And
pieces.
you start to understand why some filmmakers are like, oh, I really liked the cinematography in that film. And you're like, but it was a bad film. But then you realize, well, yeah, but it had
Yeah.
good cinematography.
Yeah.
Because your brain starts to separate those ideas out.
Yeah.
Because you break it down, and you might take a film that you're not a fan of, but you love how they shot their scenes.
Yeah.
And I would have never thought of that before Calarts, where I was like, oh, yeah, I guess. I mean, it's one of those things where you're like, well, duh. I mean,
Yeah.
just because I don't like the overall thing doesn't mean I hate everything it did.
Yeah.
But you start to be able to put into words what you like about it. And you can even say like, oh, I want some like Ozu type cinematography.
Yeah.
Which Ozu is a very good director. I like his work.
Yeah. It's some good cool shots.
And sometimes you'll see people go like, what is this? Like see like a modern movie kind of doing an Ozu shot. Like there was a horror movie that did some Ozu shots, which
Yeah.
it's kind of like the actor looking directly at the camera type stuff. That's like one of his
okay.
big things. And
Yeah.
somebody was like critiquing it, and I was like, they're doing an Ozu shot.
Yeah. That's so funny.
So it makes you kind of look pretentious, and you're like, no, I'm just saying, I think they were trying
Yeah.
to emulate Ozu.
Yeah, and it's like, hey, but that's good. So, if you're trying to emulate someone, or if you're trying to, reference for your shots and how you want your thing to look. But yeah, no, I guess it makes you realize how many things have to be done so well for a film to all come together and be a great film.
And
Yeah, it's
it also
tough.
it also changed how I look at bad film.
Yeah.
I mean, I've always loved garbage. Don't get me wrong. I'm one of those people that loves so bad it's good film.
Yeah.
But whenever I find a movie that just didn't come together, I evaluate it differently. I'm like, well, who is I'm like, this feels like an executive's fault and not the director's fault, because sometimes you get a sense of who came in where.
Yeah.
And you're like, oh, and you realize more and more how many different things can go wrong in a film.
Yeah.
And you kind of stop asking certain questions.
Yeah.
Like I'm a lot less critical of continuity issues
Yeah.
ever since doing the film directing program. And, and I see people still kind of bring up continuity issues and like, how did they miss that? And I'm like, well, once you've worked on a film set, you know how they missed it.
Yeah. You'll know how they missed it. That's funny.
And, like I think the big one recently was Game of Thrones and the Starbucks coffee cup.
Yeah.
Chances are it just got through it's easy for things like that to go through a bunch of hands and just not be noticed, because that's not what they're probably looking at. They're looking at the
Yeah.
actors,
Yeah.
and they're going to value the
costumes.
best and they're going to
Yeah.
value the best performance over continuity.
Yeah, yeah,
Because
yeah.
if you could have perfect continuity, but if the actor is screwing up their lines, who cares? You know?
Yeah.
The
Yeah,
goal
yeah, yeah.
is to have the acting so solid that you're not focused on the continuity.
Yeah.
And so that was probably the best take that they had, or their favorite take, or the take that got across the right emotions, and just nobody saw the coffee cup because they were more focused on what the actors were doing.
Yeah.
And then by the time it was released, it was like, well, you know, now it's just a funny meme.
Yeah.
And I think they went back and digitally removed it. I'm not sure, but you know, nowadays you can digitally remove things.
A lot of stuff, huh?
And that
Yeah.
yeah. But
amazing.
when people were like, how did they miss that? I'm like, oh, very easily.
Yeah.
Like,
Things happen, shit happens. I mean, yeah, I just, it made me think of even just the like the Justice League and the Snyder Cut, you know, and just
Yeah.
seeing how monumentally different it is between those two. Oh my gosh.
yeah.
But
Well,
yeah,
even if you go online, you'll find those like such and such movie like trailer re-edited to be, you know, like a horror film, or like Jaws, but it's a romantic comedy. And
yeah,
the editing alone just changes the tone, and
yeah.
it's
It's funny.
or
Yeah.
sometimes the marketing is what let a movie down, because that reminded me how I was actually seeing someone do a review of the movie Ma with was it Octavia Spencer, I believe. And
Yeah, yeah, I
he
think so.
pointed out one of the disservices to this film was that it just had a really bad marketing campaign, because
Yeah,
it
people didn't know what
marketed
it
the
was.
movie. Yeah, they marketed the movie as something it wasn't. And so people went in with a different expectation. They also put all the spoilers in the trailer, which
Boo.
which is like it's a genuine, and people ask about that. That's a genuine strategy, but it's a strategy from the executives and not the actual artists. So
Yeah. They want you to be
that's the other thing.
surprised.
Yeah. And that's the
Yeah.
other thing you learn, is that the artists are often at odds with the guy behind the desk, and you're trying to explain to them how art works, and they're just like, well, I know how numbers work. And you're like, but that's
Yeah.
not.
Yeah,
Please
like I'm trying to
stop.
get people to even watch this piece of shit that I produce with you.
Yeah, and it is why whenever I watch a movie, like if an actor has a bad performance, I go like, okay, why? Oh, sorry. Oh, I'm so sorry.
Bless you. No worries.
I'm like, why was there a bad performance? Like, what happened here? Especially if it's an actor that has done well elsewhere.
Yeah.
I'm like, what happened? Like, where did it go wrong?
Yeah.
And you start to become critical in a different way.
Yeah, which is a great way to be able to think. And so the FDP program is 3 years, right?
Yes.
Okay. And so what was an average day like in the program? And was it very different semester to semester?
Yes. It was
Okay.
it was different year to year as well.
Got
The
it.
first year is pretty hectic. You're usually in classes from like 9 a.m. till like 9 o'clock at night.
Yeah. Wow.
And I
You
mean,
have breaks in
I
between
also,
though, right?
oh yeah, you get breaks and stuff like that.
Yeah.
But you're just in class because they kind of throw all of the basics at you at first. Because while they ask you for films when you apply, they don't really use that against you. And what I mean by that is, like, if your film is not because like I made a stop motion film, and it was my first stop motion film ever for my application, and I didn't know how to light it, so the whole thing is like piss yellow. And I did it without sort of the bells and whistles of a lot of the stop motion programs they have now that make it
Yeah.
so much easier.
Yeah.
I had an old camera, and I just clicked, moved the doll, click, moved the doll, click. And I was just like, hope that looks right.
Yeah,
'Cause I
yeah,
was
yeah.
kind of flying blind. And that got me in because
Yeah.
the storytelling was strong, and they were like, well, we can teach her how to do the technical stuff.
Yeah.
And so the first year is really dedicated to teaching you the technical stuff. And like,
Okay.
so they don't really look to see if you're already a great filmmaker. They're like, are you good at storytelling? Do you have good stories?
Yeah.
And my writing was like, they were like, this is pretty solid. She's not good at camera work. She's not good at, lighting, but we can teach her that, or we can teach her to work with a gaffer to light it.
Yeah.
So if you're not like the best at lighting or something, do not worry. They will not
Yeah.
judge you for that. But so the first year is very much like, here's the basics. And, like we learned cinematography, we learned lighting, we have film history for the first 2 years.
Oh, okay.
And I believe, yes, for the first 2 years you get film history, and it's a great class. I really love, and Gary Mayers teaches it. Gary Mayers is one of the best teachers I've ever had. He is a very awkward fellow. He will probably hate this shout out because he's a very easily embarrassed man, but he is the sweetest person. He's a great teacher.
Yeah.
And he's also one of those teachers where if you're making something and he doesn't understand it, he'll just tell you. He's like, I don't really get it, but you do you.
Yeah,
and
that's so
sometimes
funny.
that's all you can ask for is just someone to be that honest with you.
Yeah. That's a class I wish I had taken now that you say that, like film history. But anyway.
Oh, any Gary Mayers class, because he also teaches the Western. I took the Western. I did not like Westerns before this class. And the best part is Gary also did not like Westerns before he started teaching this class.
But now he loves
'Cause
Westerns.
He doesn't love Westerns.
Okay.
He actually still doesn't really like. He grew up in the era where there was an oversaturation of Westerns. But he took on this whole process of teaching about Westerns because he's like, I found out there are some that are good, and he's like, I wanted to talk about the history of those. And so he teaches this class called the Western, and I walked away being like, okay, there are some really genuinely good Western films, and I had a better appreciation. So Calarts is very much a place where you go in thinking you hate something, and you're like, well, I was wrong. I hated
this is pretty cool.
What I hated was the mainstream sort of perception of this thing.
Okay,
Like I hated the perception of Westerns, and to be fair, we also talked about the racism that exists within the Western genre, and that made it a much more engaging class because you're like, oh, okay, we're not just gonna gloss over that and pretend that it's totally fine.
Yeah.
But yeah, so for the first year, you're basically just learning the basics, and then the second year, you have more freedom to pick whatever classes you really want to. You have like a list of things you have to kind of get so you can graduate the required classes. And then the third year, you're kind of just let loose. You have maybe 2 required classes, and then the rest are just like, I don't know, kids, do whatever you want. And so it's very much
make some
becomes
movies.
Like, make some movies, kids. And so it is very self-propelled. After the first year, you're kind of making it your own.
Got it. Okay.
And also a lot of the times they encourage you to focus on something to make money while you also learn the directing thing. Like they'll be like, hey, maybe you should go learn sound design. You're really good at that. Like, hey, maybe you should go focus on editing. That'll make you some money while you try to become the director.
Yeah.
And in my case, they were like, hey, you're very much the writer of your class. You should go take all the writing classes.
Yeah.
And so they kind of tell you, they'll work with you about what you might want to take and what classes exist that would benefit you.
That's nice.
But you also have to start kind of getting a hold of what you want to do.
Yeah.
Because if you don't actually know what you want to do, you'll kind of just, I don't want to say flounder, you'll struggle.
Yeah.
Because they stop telling you what to take at some point. Like there's only like, the first year you're set, they'll tell you everything.
Yeah.
But once you hit the second year, you're kind of on your own with creating your curriculum. Mm-hmm. And there's only a few things you have to hit on. But they're very general. Like it's sort of like,
nice.
Oh, you need a special topics class. Here's a list of special topics you can take. But
okay. So it's pretty. Yeah. It's quite loose, especially in the MFA program. Mm-hmm. Okay. Yeah. Well, there we go. Hey, y'all. We'll get right back to the interview. Hope this is helping you think about art school. Kat just wanted me to promote her audio stories. 1, Georgie Romero is Done For. 2, Soft Boiled Detective. And that one I do a little voice in one of the episodes. So why not give it a listen? I'll go ahead and put the links to those in the description. And thank you. Back to the interview. Oh yeah, no, just because you've already talked a lot about how FDP is, very narrative compared to film video. Did you feel any pressure at all, like to lean into certain genres or certain kinds of storytelling, or do you feel like you and all of your classmates were well supported in whatever kinds of movies that you wanted to work on?
So this is there are layers to this one. It's not that I didn't feel supported. I just feel like I made comedies for the most part, and the film directing program doesn't have a lot of comedy filmmakers. And it's not that they'll try to, and I also did stop motion, like for my, and everyone in the film directing program is live action. So they were very confused by me. But they would usually be very honest and just tell you, like, I don't know what you're doing. Like, I got sent to the experimental animation faculty a lot. Like, they know me in experimental animation because I kept going over there. So a lot of cross-contamination happens at Calarts. But in terms of comedy, they don't do a lot of traditional comedy at Calarts, at least not in the film directing program. They're much more, for lack of a better term, they're more art house. And so sometimes they didn't really know what to do with what I was making. And I think if you aren't, you have to kind of be very confident and very like steadfast in what you're doing, because it'll be very, because I got talked out of doing stuff that I look back and I'm like, I wish I hadn't let them talk me out of that. It was just, they didn't understand what I was making.
I think that's a super helpful thing.
Yeah, because they didn't understand what I was making, and I didn't have enough confidence to believe that I knew what I was making. And so I just kind of let them talk me out of stuff. And because of that, I had films that I just wasn't happy with, because it became too much of a compromise. And I think when you're at Calarts, you're going to have to compromise so much when you leave Calarts that just try not to, like, if you can, just try to be true to your vision without being completely stubborn to the point where you're not taking any feedback. But I think you have to, like, if you're doing comedy at least, you do have to be very confident. And I think you would need to rely more on your peers than some of the faculty. Gary Mayers is great, though. Talk to Gary. You can talk to him about anything. Gary Mayers is going to hate this because I just keep telling everyone to talk to him.
And he's just going to be like,
It's like, no, he's a great guy though. But
I know what he looks like. He looks very sweet, even though I've never interacted with him much.
Yeah,
he seems like a very sweet guy.
But like, and that isn't to say that they aren't supportive or that they won't help you. It's just they don't necessarily make what you're making. Now, if you're making the type of stuff that they're familiar with, they're usually pretty good. Juan Pablo is also really good. I don't know if I believe he's still there.
Okay.
Yeah, Juan Pablo Gonzalez, he's really good. But like my mentor my first year is no longer there. He was really good though. Unfortunately, he's no longer there. I think he understood my comedy. Because I could show him weird internet memes, and I'm like, I want to make a movie that's similar to like Yogi Okie Dokie, and he's just like, I don't. Like, all right, man. I guess let's do this.
He'll just watch him like, okay, yeah, I get it. Let's go for it. How do we capture that feeling?
I highly recommend Yogi Okie Dokie.
Yogi Okie Dokie. Are those memes?
Ogie. It's a weird video. I think if you know Everything is Terrible, they tend to find old VHS tapes and then make like little short videos based on it. And
okay,
I wanted to make a movie inspired by Everything is Terrible, and I showed my mentor at this very prestigious school Yogi Okie Dokie, and I was like, I kind of want to do something like this, and he was just like, all right. And so I think if you're coming in with something that they're not familiar with, you also should come in with a lot of references.
To help communicate the visual style, I guess.
Right. Yeah, because I wasn't bringing in enough references sometimes, I think, and so they thought they knew what I was trying to make, and then I would show them the actual reference, and they're like, oh, I never imagined this. And
okay. Well, I think that's really useful advice, too. Just be able to show.
So it really depends on what you're making. And again, it's not that they won't support you. It's just that they won't necessarily know what you're doing. Which is why sometimes you really need to lean on your peers
Yeah.
And you might just have to be like, hey, I know you're trying to help me, and I know you were giving me advice from, like, you learn how to really process advice and process creative criticism, or not creative, sorry, constructive criticism.
Yeah.
Because before, at least for me personally, before I went to Calarts, I was like, well, I know what constructive criticism is, but I had never been taught how to process it and how to say, like, all right, they don't know what I'm trying to accomplish, and that's okay.
Yeah.
So how will I take what they're telling me and apply it in a way that's useful and will accomplish what I'm doing, or what I'm trying to do? And another thing Calarts taught me, actually, is sometimes someone's criticism is less about what they're saying and is more about, like, the subtext of what they're saying.
Yeah.
To give an example, what I mean by that is I wrote a script that was actually based on something that had actually happened to me, and one of the professors looked at it and he said, well, this isn't very realistic. This seems like it just isn't a natural thing that would happen. And the real critique isn't, oh, this is unrealistic and just would never happen. That may have been what came out of their mouth. What they're saying is you didn't set up the world for me to believe this.
Yeah. Okay. That makes sense.
And so I go, okay, I just haven't set up a world where they believe this could happen yet.
Yeah. To get like the tone right and the way that people are and where they, just every little aspect of your script.
Right. Like if you were making a movie about 2020, everyone would believe everything in that script happened because you have set the tone via
like
2020.
The shit year. Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay.
Or even just like the way the characters behave. Like if you have them behaving like the Joker, for example. I'm using some very I've been watching. I watched Birds of Prey a little earlier today, so it's on my brain.
Very, very art house references in this interview.
But like if you look at like Harley Quinn, if you were to just throw her in an audience, you'd be like, well, this is very absurd behavior. This doesn't make any sense. Because if you just had her do something like, like have a hyena out of nowhere, you'd be like, wait, why does this woman have a hyena? But because they've established who she is, you go, of course she has a hyena. There's a huge difference. And so sometimes when people give you a critique, and so that's also important to remember when you're getting feedback from your faculty at Calarts, is sometimes they will give you feedback, and it's okay to disagree with it. And sometimes what they're saying is not what they're actually saying, which is very annoying, but it's true.
Yeah, but it's tough to navigate through.
And that's true for all humans, not just Calarts.
Yeah, of course. But would you say that these kinds of maybe miscommunications or inabilities to communicate, was that the most challenging part of the program for you, or would you say there were other parts that were more challenging?
When it came to working with other people in my program, it really did come down to communicating ideas.
Yeah.
And also just having the confidence to like stand up for those ideas.
Yeah.
And also knowing when the person in question is right and you're wrong.
Yeah, being able to be like, okay, I need to let go of my vision or let go of my hard-headedness.
Right. Killing your darlings is still very much a part of it, but when it came to myself and not necessarily my interactions with others, I would say the hardest part, I guess it really all comes down to confidence, but I sort of wish that I had just really pushed more with making my films.
Yeah.
Because I made a few films, but like I just let myself get too embarrassed to really push to keep them going. Because I was like, oh, my films are bad. And it's like, of course they're bad. Just make them.
Yeah, I get that.
Like your first year film, everyone knows your first year film is garbage. Everyone. Because they just throw you into a movie and they're like, make something. And you're just like, but I don't know how to do anything. And they're like, we don't care. Make a movie.
And that's how you learn.
So, and so I think that was the thing, is just not having confidence in my own skills that, if anything, held me back more than anything that Calarts did.
Yeah. I mean, I feel like I really relate to that. I feel like so many of us, I feel like in a way that's kind of what art school is, because we are at this time in our life where, and I don't think it's even an age thing, because I feel like so many of us come in at different ages, but it's like an experience thing. And it's like, oh, well, I'm here for this experience. I don't know exactly what I'm doing yet. And then afterwards, you're like, oh, that was the whole point. I was just supposed to just keep on trying things. And then it all gels, I feel like, once you graduate. And you start like, oh, boop, 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 boop. And then I'll do this. And yeah.
Yeah, so that's dare to suck.
Yeah.
That's kind of the thing I wish I'd told myself, is just don't care if it's good.
Yeah.
Don't worry about it.
Dare to fly low.
Yeah. And
That's
it
so
really just
funny.
came to, yeah, and I just didn't stand up for myself enough, and I can't blame Calarts for that. Like,
Yeah.
teachers would say, like, I don't think this movie will work, and I would just believe them instead of being like, no, I need to fight for my vision. So,
Yeah. And then, okay.
because the teachers always meant well, but they don't know what's going on in your head.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. Of course, how can anyone? But that's good. Yeah. Now you're passing on the lessons to maybe some potential FDP students, or I guess just directing students in general. And and so Kat, now that we're graduated from Calarts, we know what the price tag that comes along with Calarts. Do you have any financial advice for prospective students?
Don't go.
Just make movies.
Don't go to Calarts. I will say, it's Robert Rodriguez. I think he said, "Don't go to film school,"
Yeah.
and he's not 100% wrong. It is difficult. I have no sense of self-preservation, so I just went like, "Oh well, I guess we're just gonna go into debt for the rest of our lives." Neat.
Yeah.
And the way I looked at it is the trade-off is the connections you make. And, it's the way my dad always described universities, and I hate to say that there's some truth to this, is sometimes you're not paying for the education, you're paying to be part of the club. And we kind of paid to be part of the Calarts Club.
Yeah.
And I will say that it has done wonders for me.
It's a great club.
And
It's a fun
yeah,
club.
it is a good club to be part of. But when it comes to the actual financial thing, there are a lot of on-campus jobs, and teachers will usually try to help you with that. I remember one day sitting in the office, and I was just sobbing because I didn't have enough money for. I couldn't even tell you what was going on.
Yeah.
But I just didn't have enough
something.
money to. Yeah, I just didn't have enough money to be alive or something. I don't know. And I was just sobbing, and the teachers saw me, and they were like, "Oh, don't worry, we'll figure something out." And they did, and they got me some and they and I got some extra funds just because I was losing my mind in the film office.
There are
But
resources.
it was they'll do their best to help you in ways they can. They can't always do that, but they'll try. But it really comes down to just trying to take out as little as you can. Really, really work on networking while you're at Calarts. Really, really work on networking, because sometimes securing your income for after is going to make a world of difference in terms of your debt. Really focus on, getting an internship. I regret not focusing more on internships.
Yeah.
But if it is possible to take out as little as you can in terms of the financial aid, if you can. I know that's not going to be possible for everybody. If you can get a scholarship, that's lovely, but I know that that's also very difficult, so easier said than done.
Yeah.
But it really just
All the
comes down
things.
to, it just comes down to everyone's individual situation.
Yeah.
I've managed to get by. But through a lot of the times just sheer dumb luck. But
Yeah.
but like I worked as like a TA. I did all sorts of random jobs. Like if you just kind of float around and bother people and just go like, "Hey, are there any jobs here? Hey, are there any jobs here? Are there any jobs here?" They will like show up and just like they'll be like, "All right, here's like a random job. Also, free food all over the place on campus."
That's true.
If you're going to Calarts in person, just sometimes wander around and you'll find free food. Like I stumbled on free food so many times.
Yeah.
And
Just
even if
events
you-
that were happening.
Just random events, and even if you don't think you belong there, just don't act like you don't belong there. Just show up and start. And no one stops you. I was
just get a
never
plate.
stopped.
Just plate up.
Yeah, like, and it would be faculty that would see me and they'd be like, well, you're not supposed to be here. You want a slice of pizza? And I'm like, yeah, I do. And,
Yeah, I do, actually.
and so sometimes, so they'd be like, well, you have to leave, but you can go get some pizza before you leave. And I'm like,
That's so funny.
so yeah, so like, even if you don't think you belong somewhere, just grab the food and run, because a lot of the times the faculty will not stop you. At least that was my
They would feel
experience.
mean, I'm sure. I would say too, like for anybody, like all the things that you're talking about, and with my experience, I feel like if you just know that you want to go to this place or you want to go to art school and make it happen, you'll be all right. Just keep on moving and keep on looking for, the next thing. And, it's not as dire as it might seem.
Well, and also I look at it this way, and again, maybe this is, I don't know if this is privilege or anything, but I'm just like, you know what? The entire country's in constant debt, at least on the American side of things. We're just all in debt, whatever, screw it. We're all miserable. We're all having a bad time. Might as well just like go into debt for something I care about. And now we're all talking about canceling student debt. And I'm like, can we do that? I would love that.
I know. Cancel all the student debt.
And I also understand if people can't do that. Like I understand,
of course. If there's just no.
Yeah, and if you're in that boat, you're not going to be screwed if you don't go to Calarts. You're fine. Like, don't worry about it. Just annoy a bunch of Calarts students and get in with them, and then you'll be part of the Calarts mafia anyway. So
just get into a club, and then you can just hang out, just be friends with people. Oh, and something you made me think of too, Kat. Oh, sorry, no, you go.
Mm-hmm. No, you go ahead. I've already forgotten it.
Oh, damn it! These art school brains. No, when you were talking about networking too, I was gonna say, an advice I'd give to somebody, because I thought of networking. I was so shy about it. I didn't want to seem like I was looking for favors or looking for help or things like that. So I would just say, I feel like a much better way to think about it is not, how can I figure out what's gonna help me or what I'm gonna do, but more so, what are the needs of people or organizations or projects that I see, and what are ways that my skill set or skills I'm interested in developing could be of use to this whatever. So it's really just, I feel like the more you focus on other people, like the more effortless your quote unquote networking will be, and you can just grow in those ways.
I'll admit, when it came to the networking, I had an advantage because I was raised in a very loud Midwestern family.
Yeah.
And anyone who's from the Midwest knows that we're just used to talking to strangers, and we're just like, hey, how you doing? Like we've been friends for ages, and you'll come up and like, how long have you known them? I'm like, I don't know, I just met them like 5 minutes ago. And you're just like, but you were, what?
Yeah.
And I would get that a lot. And also people in California find that to be quite the novelty personality to have. Because they're like, she just talks to people.
People in California are so selfish. Yeah.
But like, I just kind of turned on that, like, and I'm very socially awkward and I have a lot of social anxiety, but apparently my reaction to my social anxiety is to just get more friendly.
Yeah.
Like, okay, brain,
cover
let's
it up.
do that. But just like hide it. And also I just had parents that were very much like, you gotta go socialize. Like talk to people. And so
They
now
sound
I'm
great.
an adult and I would just walk up to people and I would just have a conversation with them. And usually you just let them ask the question. Like I'm just like, hey, how you doing? What are you doing here? And then they go like, and then they tell you why they're there, and they go into their little thing, and you kind of do that thing where you're like, oh, that's very interesting, and you kind of mirror back what they're saying in a way that's that old FBI tactic where you're just like, oh, Fox, huh? And then they go, yeah, Fox. I've worked at Fox for 10 years. And you're like, 10 years? Yeah, I started as, you know what I mean? And you just kind of like do that.
Yeah.
And they go like, why are you here? And then you kind of give them your spiel. And one thing I would say is, don't say you are trying to become a director or you're trying to become a writer. Just say you are one.
Yeah.
Just say, oh, I'm a director. Yeah, and even if you're just like, and then they go like, what have you done? And you just talk about your projects. And you can even just be like, I'm working on this. Focus on what you're doing and what you're not doing.
There you go.
Like, just focus on what you're doing, and
Yeah.
even if it doesn't seem like a lot, it'll make it sound like a lot.
Yeah.
If you don't focus on the negatives and you just go like,
Yeah.
oh, I'm a director, I'm working on a 5-minute film that's like about this, or you don't even have to say the time, it's just like, oh, I'm working on a short film, it's about blah blah blah, and these are, and it's I'm making it because blah blah blah, and they go, okay, cool.
Yeah.
And they're not going to sit there and grill you and be like, well, what company is it for? Like, they don't care.
Yeah.
And if they ever do ask you, you can just be honest and be like, oh, it's a student film. And they'll be like, oh, cool.
Yeah.
They're not going to judge you for that. So just know that whoever you're talking to, well, maybe not all of them, but a lot of them also started as someone with nothing to their name.
Yeah.
In terms of making art. There was a time when they had to make their first art film. And so,
Yeah.
just focus on what you are doing and what you can do. And, even if it's just like, oh, I'm a director, and they go, oh, what have you directed? And you go like, well, I'm currently writing a short. You can, you know what I mean? Like, you don't say,
Yeah.
oh, I haven't directed anything. You don't focus on that because they don't care about what you're not doing.
Yeah.
Just say like,
Yeah.
oh, well, I'm writing a film that is, and then they go, oh, okay, and
Yeah.
they'll get the
Yeah.
hint that maybe you don't have a director title yet, but that you see yourself that way.
Yeah, and I feel like it's also about just like, what are you interested in right now? And then, does it click anything in them of like, oh, maybe they're interested, maybe there's parallels, and you're never gonna know that unless
Yeah.
you're willing to be open with, whatever your movie's about, whatever your short film is about. Nice. And
And
so
sometimes
after
they're
all-
not going
oh,
to
sorry.
be into what you're making. Oh, sorry.
no, yeah. Sometimes
Sorry, this is
they're
the
they're
lag.
really just gonna be, yeah. No, it's the light.
Oh, yeah. Sometimes, sorry.
Yeah.
Like, sometimes they're just not going to be interested in what you're making, and that's okay.
Mm-hmm.
Because I've had the honor of pitching shows, and they just weren't what the studio was looking for, and I'm like, that's cool.
Oh, cool!
And
I
they're,
didn't know
you
you've
know-
done that. That's awesome.
Yeah,
That's fun.
I pitched to a couple of studios. I don't know if I should say which ones. They were some of the biggies, but
You can
they
tell
said
me and
no.
I'll cut
They
it out.
passed. Okay. Well, it was, and I
Oh,
got to pitch to
nice.
them.
That's so fun.
But-
I'd love to hear,
Yeah.
like, not right, like another time. I'd love to hear about how your pitching experiences were. But anyway,
But like, I was able to pitch some shows to some networks, and it went really well, and they were really cool and chill. But ultimately, they passed for one reason or another. And sometimes it was just what I was making didn't mesh. Sometimes they were like, "Oh, we're making something that's too similar to that," and you have to realize it's not personal, and
Yeah,
you
just
have
the
to just be
business.
like, yeah, and they'll also be really drawn to you if you just accept that that's the way the cookie crumbles. Like, you
yeah,
don't have to be self-deprecating, but you go, oh, okay, no, I get it, but thank you, keep me in mind for future things. And then they go like, oh, okay, she didn't throw a tantrum, cool. Or, oh,
Yeah.
she's still willing to work with us, even though
Yeah.
we said no. Because you'd be amazed at how many people do not react well to the word no.
yeah,
But like, they want to work with you. They'll think in terms of like, well, she has like a really good personality. She's, really easy to work with, even when she's not getting her way. So
yeah,
we'll keep her in mind for the future.
yeah.
So sometimes
It's like just building that relationship.
Yeah. So sometimes
Yeah.
even if you're going in to pitch something, remember that it's not necessarily about that.
Yeah,
A lot of it is about building that relationship, because
yeah,
they will remember you in the future, because sometimes your connections will not pay off for maybe years.
yeah,
Because I've met people, and then they kind of disappeared into the ether, and I'm like, well, I wonder what happened to them. And then like 6
Yeah.
months to a year later, they'll email me out of the blue and just be like, hey, what's up? What are you doing? I know this person you should meet. And I'm just like, oh, okay.
yeah.
Neat.
You didn't realize you were still like in a thing. Yeah, I guess as long as you keep clarifying the kind of work you're doing and just putting it out there, eventually like
Yeah.
things will start to gel. I mean,
Yeah,
did you? I'm sorry.
Well, and to give a specific example, like if you look at Phineas and Ferb,
Yeah.
people love that show. It was a big
Yeah,
deal.
it's a great show.
And the creator, he's on TikTok, and he seems so sweet and nice. He seems like a really great guy. It
Yeah.
took him 13 years to sell that show.
Wow.
It took him 13 years. Or if you look
Yeah.
at Queen's Gambit, it took them 30 years to convince a studio to make a
To
show
do
about
this chess movie. Yeah. Yeah,
Yeah,
that's
like
so
nobody
interesting. Yeah,
believes.
and everything.
Yeah. And so just because you have a good idea doesn't mean that they'll be into it in that moment. And they're going to say mean things to you sometimes. I mean, that has not happened to me. I've actually been treated very kindly, and I don't want to take that for granted. The companies I pitched to were nothing but kind to me. But there are going to be times
Yeah,
when you
that's
meet
awesome.
someone who says something really mean to you.
Yeah.
I applied to some, it was like a residency. It wasn't even in America. And I applied to it and I got some really mean feedback. But whenever I talk to other people in my same, situation, they're like, I don't agree with any of that person's feedback. So
Yeah, it's so
gonna
subjective.
be, it's going to be rough. So like, just go into these situations without this need to sell it on the spot. This
Yeah.
idea that you'll be an overnight success is not, that's a Hollywood myth.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. But I mean, with, having gone through the FDP program, did you feel upon graduation that you were ready for the real world? You were ready to just get into the business? Or did you feel like there are things that you had to learn the hard way that you wish you had been prepared for?
I kind of wished I had one more year in the program. Like I kind of wanted one more year, but I don't know if that would have actually made me feel more prepared or if that was just the lie I told myself.
Yeah, you want that comfort, that warm hug.
Yeah, I just wanted to go back to what I knew.
Yeah.
Because the one constant from every person that has ever graduated, regardless of what program or what year, it's been true for BFAs, it's been true for MFAs. Graduating is a very bittersweet moment.
Yeah.
On the one hand, well, I guess I shouldn't say that's true for everyone. There are a lot of people that were like glad to be out, and then there were some people that don't want to leave. But for a lot of people, there's a bittersweetness.
Yeah.
You leave, and I don't think. I'll put it this way: one thing I learned about learned through film directing is that you're never ready.
Yeah.
There's no such thing as
That's
being
good.
ready.
Yeah.
And that was their reasoning on films as well. They're like, don't wait until you're ready to make a film. You'll never be ready.
Just do it.
Yeah. And that
Yeah.
was also another suggestion I have is just make content. Don't even worry about, like put content on YouTube, whatever, put it on TikTok, just make stuff.
Yeah.
And don't worry about if you're ready. There's no such thing. So
There we
I
go.
was not ready to graduate, but no one ever is. And I did need a recovery period because at least in the MFA program, you're kind of running on adrenaline for like 3 years. So I kind of needed a break for a minute. But yeah, I can't say I'll ever be ready for the real world. There's no such thing. And also just paying bills is hard and all of that, even if you're, unless I get a real cushy job, it's not, I'm just never going to be ready. So, don't ever expect to be ready and you won't be disappointed.
Yeah. There you go. Just expect that you'll learn what you can and then you'll do what you can on graduation and just enjoy every moment of it, I guess. But I mean, with all that, I don't even know if this is something that is answerable because I'm sure there are so many things that'll come to mind. But do you feel like there is a most useful thing you got out of Calarts' FDP program?
Honestly, the relationship with your peers is usually the best thing you'll get out of it. Because some people have gone through Calarts and had a miserable time. Some people have gone through and had a wonderful time. It's very dependent on the human in their personal experiences through the school, because it's true of any school in the world, really. But one thing that even people who hated their time at Calarts versus the people who loved their time at Calarts, one thing they can typically agree on is that they appreciated their peers. And I think that's something I agree with.
And the relationships that continue.
The relationships you build at Calarts, and they even said that on our first day, at Calarts, is like the relationships you build here are going to be the most important aspect of your education here. And they weren't wrong. Like, I didn't totally get it when they said that, but then once I went through the program, I was like, oh, I get it. And I still feel connected, even though I've been graduated for almost, 3 years now. And, but I still feel really connected to the community. And it's just because once you're in, you're kind of in. It's unlike any other school in that regard. Like, once I graduated from my undergrad, it was kind of like, oh, maybe I'll keep in touch with people. Maybe I won't. We'll see. And I just went about my life, and I think that's most schools. But with Calarts, you really connect with people, and they just kind of stick around forever.
And they're trying to make their work, and they have different experiences.
Yeah, and you're going to be able to keep making your art because of the people you meet. Because unless you get real lucky, your chances are you're not going to be making enough money to make your art when you first graduate. Or at least, I guess it depends on what you're making, but like you probably won't be making enough money to make movies. Unless you connect with some really good friends through, like people I know through the film directing program. Some of them have film equipment that they've collected over the years, and I'm like, hey, I need to make a short film, and they just they show up with their boom mics, and they're like, I know someone with a camera. We'll show up and we'll make a movie.
That's awesome.
And so you really become it's like this, you scratch my back, I'll scratch yours, but on this much bigger scale than I ever thought could exist.
I know what you mean.
So the most useful thing is going to be your peers,
the people.
So that's why I also say networking. Networking is probably some of the people I've met were through my former classmates who had met like a producer, and they're like, hey, I know this producer. Do you want to talk to them? And I'm like, yes, I do. And so really it's going to be your peers that, regardless of your experience through Calarts, the one thing you're going to agree on is probably the peers being the best.
And I love that. No, whatchamacallit. I mean, look at us. We're doing this interview. I just voiced something for audio show Kat's doing. In Ernie's class. Sorry.
Yeah, I just emailed you out of the blue and was like, hey, can you do this? And you were like, yeah, sure.
Because honestly, like, I feel like in Ernie's class, like the people who I felt most kind of got what I wanted to do, and like I enjoyed your guys' scripts, probably was you, Andy Gilchrist, and maybe like William Paul Smith. Like, I feel like you three are the ones I think of as like, oh yeah, I feel like, they get it. And of course, and like other people got other stuff, but it very much, and like you'll quickly learn who meshes with your style, and whatever your style is, you'll find someone. And you'll quickly just start making work with them constantly. Like, I think I told you to watch Broad City at some point. And of course I love Broad City and In-Betweeners. You mentioned, and In-Betweeners is great, and just so many things. And like, who knows if I'm getting off on a tangent. Who knows if F-Boys will ever happen? But there's other stuff I'm trying to work on. But I learned a lot, and it's a lot of fun. But okay. And so, I guess, Kat, the last thing for these viewers who are dying for this information. I guess it's similar to the last question, but what would you say is the best advice that you received at Calarts that you would want to share with, an incoming student? Or I guess just anybody.
I think it goes back to that you're never ready. Like that.
Yeah, just do it.
Yeah, just do it. Because, like, will it suck? Maybe. I don't know. Who's the arbitrator? Like, who decides that? But ultimately, you're just never going to be ready, and that's okay. Just make stuff. Like, I'm still not ready, and I'm making I would love to make an animated show, but that's a lot of money. So I'm like, well, let's just do fiction podcasts, and I'm doing random TikToks where I'm treating it more like theater, where I'm just putting on weird, like I just put like a little weird headscarf on, and I'm like, now I'm not babushka. Sorry, I put a babushka on. And I'm like, well, now I'm Baba Yaga, and now I'm going to do skits as Baba Yaga. But there's, like, absolutely no reason to truly believe I am this character.
Characters and stuff.
Yeah, and it's like...
Nice.
And I'm like, well, if people are getting TikTokers are getting TV shows through Netflix now, I'm like, might as well. Let's do it.
Right? Like, why not just try every avenue you have?
Yourself back. Yeah, and just make art. And there's nothing that... There's no art that is beneath you. No art is beneath you. Like
Yeah,
everything.
that's good advice,
There's even
too.
like a TikTok class in the film and video office now, where you can learn how to make short films for TikTok. In
What?
class.
That's so funny.
Yeah.
That's
I don't.
hilarious.
Yeah.
But there's
they
people doing
start-
crazy shit on there and doing like wild effects.
Yeah, like I know some of the experimental.
I've seen some
of the film
magic
and video-
TikToks that were out of this world.
Like I've seen. I think some of the film and video kids are doing their stuff. Like I think the former dean of the film and video
Yeah.
office has like a TikTok that he puts his art films up on, and it is unique.
Leighton?
Leighton, yeah, Leighton. Leighton Pierce. He puts his stuff up on TikTok.
I had a class with him. He's a trip. Yeah, that's so
yeah,
funny.
he has a
That's so
TikTok
funny.
and he puts films up
Yeah.
on there. And then Mike Bryant has a TikTok where
That's so funny.
he uses it as a supplement for his classes. And Mike Bryant's also a great teacher. I never had him. I unfortunately didn't get to know him until after I graduated. But if you can take a
Yeah.
Mike Bryant class, because I think
Yeah.
he also teaches a lot of the science classes.
Science, quote unquote. Yeah.
No, they actually do teach science there. They just teach it
Oh,
in
really?
a way, yeah, like they just teach it in a way that artists can understand. So it's real
that's
dumbed
good.
down. It's beautiful.
Got it.
But like he has a TikTok. I think it's just Mike Bryant, or no, Guppy Tattoo. I think is his.
That's
I
so
might be getting
funny.
it wrong. But like, and he just puts like supplemental material for his classes up on TikTok, and it's
I love it.
so unique. And that's
Yeah.
but like that's the nice thing about Calarts faculty is they're just always looking for new ways to make their own art and to like reach students, and they don't really look down. I mean, at least in the film directing program, they don't really look down on what you're making.
Yeah.
I will say one thing. I forgot about this. Their one I personally believe is a little bit outdated. They might have also changed how they approach this. Is they're very focused on film festivals
Yeah.
at Calarts. And I'm not saying to forego film festivals, but do not
Yeah.
ever believe they are your only avenue.
Yeah.
Because those
like
get
you're screwed
real
if you can't
expensive.
get into a festival.
Well, not even
Yeah,
that,
like all
but,
the applying to each festival and yeah.
and they can cost like $65 a pop, or more. Like I've seen some that cost $100 to apply to, and I'm just like, I can't afford that. I have debt
Yeah.
from Calarts to pay. But like,
I know. Oh my god.
You
My
know,
my
and it-
favorite
and I-
oh sorry.
oh no, I'm just like, I'm not discouraging people from applying to festivals, but Calarts does kind of adhere very strictly to the festival model. And
Yeah.
I will say that's a little outdated in my opinion.
Yeah. So maybe
But that might just-
appreciate it but be open to more.
Yeah, like, and again, I don't know how much the faculty's views have changed on this because it's been 3 years and I don't know what they've been exposed to in the meantime.
Yeah.
But if they, but there is like kind of a push to focus mostly on film festivals.
Yeah. Yeah.
And that's totally fine if you do apply to film festivals. It's great because usually a lot of the times it helps you in networking and convincing people
Yeah.
to make your next thing.
yeah.
And I've had classmates that really succeeded, like really it propelled them further to do well in a film festival.
Yeah, like you have some
But-
classmates that they were just in Sundance, right? And they have stuff
Mm-hmm.
in other places.
And
Yeah.
I would use that as like I would also just use that as really study the different ones if you are going to apply to film festivals.
Yeah, like know what
really
kind of
s-
movies do well where.
And Calarts will help you with that. They will help you,
Yeah.
but if they're ever like, oh, maybe you shouldn't put it online, just put it online anyway.
Yeah, just put it on,
Because,
just get it out there.
Film festivals are kind of changing their tune on the whole. Like, if it's online, you can't submit it to us. But just check in with the film festivals that you want to apply to if you do.
Yeah.
And then you can hold back on posting it online until after, you've applied and saw if you got in or not.
Yeah,
And then you can put it online. But, like,
yeah.
don't
Nice.
think of the festivals as your only
Avenue.
avenue.
Yeah. No, what was like my favorite, like, oh my god, the film festival hustle. My last year at Calarts, I was making a movie to try to do like the HBO Asian Pacific, Visionaries, and I missed the deadline because for some crazy reason it was Eastern time, and I was like, but isn't this LA? Anyway, I missed the deadline. So I just applied straight to the Los Angeles Asian Festival, and I got the film in there. And then I got an email from like a San Diego Asian Festival, and they're like, oh, we saw, your movie was in here. It's like, oh, and apply for this one. And so I applied, and then they rejected it from the San Diego. Like, they told me to apply, and I paid the fee, and then they rejected it. I was like, oh, they got me.
I also, and this is not related to my time at Calarts, but I have also worked as a script reader for film festivals. And while I can't give away any secret details, I don't really have any. But one of the things to remember is that your script is going through several hands. Yeah. And while maybe there was one person at that festival that really wanted you, there was just maybe someone else who's just like, doesn't really, and sometimes it's just your story didn't fit the theme of the festival that year.
Yeah.
And so people have been scouted like that. Like I knew someone that got scouted and was asked to apply to a film festival with a movie they'd made like 5 years ago. And they're like, wait, where did you even see that movie?
Yeah, that's so funny.
And so that happens, but like never take a rejection from a film festival serious. Like, don't take it too personally.
Oh yeah, I thought it was funny, but yeah, that's good advice as well.
No, I didn't think you did. I just meant for the
just for like in general, yeah. But I mean, hey, I've taken other rejections personally, so it's good advice in general.
Yeah, and I think having worked on the other side of it, you realize that it's like, there's just a lot of competition, and each place has its own really specific rules that they want you to adhere to, and even if it gets through me, like I'm usually the first line of defense on whether or not you get to the next level whenever I do this. Like I'm level 1.
Yeah.
And so, but I might be like, this is a great script. And then I send it to the next person and they go like, no, I don't like, I don't, because we're all human. And, or it might get to the very top and they're looking at it and they're like, and they're just like, oh, this is really great. But it kind of goes against all the other films we've accepted. And it would stick out like a sore thumb, and it would kind of ruin the vibe of the film festival. And that might do a disservice to all of the other films or the film in question. It might sort of warp people's ability to take this film in.
Yeah, that makes sense. Okay.
But I will also say submitting very short films is usually a much better than submitting longer films. Like if you're submitting a film.
What do you mean by that? Like how many minutes versus how many minutes?
I would say like 5 minutes or less are probably even 2 minutes is ideal.
Wow. Because they can just put it in the programming.
There's a reason for this. One, I will say that it's much kinder. You're going to be much kinder to the people who have to watch the films, and they go like, that was really great. They told a story like that. They got along with it. And also just trimming as much fat as you can to really streamline your story is a good idea. But the other reason that is a little more sort of a mercenary type thing is that it's like, they're going to be looking for tiny little films to cram in between the longer ones. And those are just, and people are trying to make longer films as a general rule. They're usually trying to make the 30-minute pieces because there's this kind of idea that the longer your film is, the more prestigious it will be. And if you only make a little 2-minute film, like one of my favorite film applications I remember was just a little 2-minute film. I can't say too much about the film itself, but it was 2 minutes long. It got in, it got out. It told me the story, and then it was done. And I'm like, that was beautiful. It was a 2-minute film. It got that, like the type of stuff you see on TikTok could actually be good practice for making a really short, to the point film.
Yeah.
And even then, it's like maybe your film isn't the best, but it's only 2 or 5 minutes. So when there's space in between these two, like 30-minute to 15-minute pieces, maybe we'll just cram you in there. And so there's like more room for you to get in.
Is it? Yeah, it's almost like a little calling card. It's like, here's a little bit of what I can do, and then you're putting yourself in a position to maybe have a conversation to be able to make a longer thing.
Because sometimes it's just getting them to know your name.
Yeah, there we go. And I think that's a wonderful place to cap it.
Oh, perfect.
So, thanks so much, Kat. Yeah. thanks
Oh
so
yeah, no,
much
this was
for
fun.
agreeing to do this. I'm sure it's going to help people. And so,
Yeah.
who knows how many people might eventually see this interview and be aided in their journeys as filmmakers or just art students in general. But
Yeah,
yeah,
hopefully. And just know that if you can't afford film school, you can still do wonders. So,
get on TikTok.
yeah, just start on TikTok. I mean, I used to make fun of them, but you know what? They know what's up. They got Netflix
It's a great
shows now.
platform. Yeah, but watch out because the Chinese government is using it to learn how to be funny like Americans.
Oh no.
You know? So
If it's not one government spying on us, it's another.
I know. Oh my gosh.
Same spying, different government, whatever.
Yeah, that's so funny. But yeah, no, thanks again, Kat, for doing this. Yeah, but yeah, let me know too, if you're ever working on stuff and you want like eyes on it,
Oh
you can
yeah.
always shoot me an email.
Oh yeah, thank
And
you. Definitely.
yeah. And hopefully I'll be able to do the same, but I won't send you too much. But awesome. All right. Well, have a nice Sunday evening. Happy
You
Mother's Day
too.
over there. Yeah,
Happy.
thank you.
Oh right, it's not Mother's Day.
It was
there where
yesterday.
you
It was
are.
yesterday
Oh, it
because
was
I'm in
yesterday.
Australia.
Well,
Yeah.
happy
It was
belated
and
Mother's Day.
thank you. I appreciate it. All right. All right. Take
All
care,
right,
Kat.
well, bye.
Yeah. Bye bye.